Hello, class. I'd like to welcome you to the next unit, Unit E, on the election process. We're going to be working our way through Chapter 7 now, starting now with Section 1 on the nomination process. So make sure you've read Section 1 carefully, then watch this short video lecture in preparation for the class activities. Section 1 is pertaining to the nomination process. In any election, oftentimes you're going to have more than one candidate for each party running that would like to win the nomination. For example, in the 2016 election for president, there are numerous Republicans who've expressed interest in being the Republican nominee. Does that make the person the president? No. That simply means that the Republican Party, as you recall the two-party system we covered, has nominated or put forth that candidate as their chosen candidate to run in the general election. So it's a critical first step in the election process to narrow down to who you're going to nominate. Most states now follow a primary election in order to run by the party to help decide who to nominate. The nomination is when the field of candidates is narrowed, as I said, leading up then to the general election in November, where the voters make the final choice of who the actual office holder will be. Couple things then, you could, in smaller local elections like city council or mayor, you would just self-announce. You might have to go out and get a petition as well, a combination of some of these top ways. You might have a petition, you might self-announce, and then have a certain number of signatures in order to get on the ballot. In larger elections like president, you're going to have a primary where people actually go out to the polls and Republicans go and vote for which of the possible candidates they like the best. And as states continue that process, eventually one will rise to the top and become nominated. So we already mentioned self-announce, which is the oldest way of just pronouncing that you are running for office. The caucuses, which is still popular in the state of Iowa, are private meetings held like maybe in the barn or machine shed or local community centers where they discuss the various candidates and decide together which one they think has the most merit. Then at the convention, each party now holds conventions. It used to be that the bigwigs would go to the convention and pick their candidate there without much or little input from the general populace. Now, of course, that's not done. Most people today can have a say through primary elections as to who the candidate will be for the Republican and the Democratic parties. And then that person is announced at the convention, not necessarily chosen, but announced at the convention. So there are many primaries. Most states, I mentioned, hold primary elections several months prior to the general election. Some states will hold closed primaries where you have to present yourself as a Democrat or Republican if you want to vote in that respective primary. Other states like Michigan have an open primary where if you are qualified to vote, you could vote in to help decide on the Republican nominee, even if you normally would vote Democratic. A runoff primary is required if someone doesn't get the majority. A nonpartisan primary would be like a small local election where you run just as your name, not as a party. If there's numerous people running for that same small city mayor slot, you might end up having a primary first to whittle it down to the top two candidates who would then appear on the ballot at the general election in November. So here's a map that you can find in your textbook as of the year 2000, the types of primaries. And as you'll notice, primaries are held at different times. New Hampshire tends to hold it first, and Florida and a few other states try to get started really early in the year of 2016. Others will be more around May. If I recall, Michigan holds its primaries sometime in May prior to the November general election. Some candidates are required to get a petition to run for local office, or if you're from a minor party, as we saw under the Reform Party when we studied that.